Citizen 12 is brought to you by Complexify, a social purpose corporation founded to support you living in alignment with your conscience and discerning what that is. Find out more at complexify.org. complexiphy.org.
Hello, citizens. My name is Paige Hulsey.
And my name is Emily Bogen.
And this is episode 14 of the Citizen 12 podcast. Citizen 12 is not a program or health treatment, but an inclusive place, common ground to share and learn. If you have not yet listened to episode 0, we invite you to do that. You'll get a good sense of what the show is about and hear our steps, which were inspired by Alcoholics Anonymous, and those can also be found through any of our sites.
A little more of a preface. This content may stir stuff up for you. In some ways, that's part of the point, but also we acknowledge that it can be hard, uncomfortable, even disruptive. Please engage with us responsibly and don't be on your own with this stuff. Be in touch if that's the right thing to do. We care about you. It's why we're making this show.
Our podcast is created in Seattle, Washington. We acknowledge this as Duwamish land and strive to honor the past, present, and future Indigenous lives here. Citizen 12 supports Duwamish tribal services by paying real rent. Find out more at realrentduwamish.org. Today's episode is our follow-up to our last show all about prayer. As we mentioned in our last episode, today we'll be diving in on some of what we think of or call set prayers. And we're going to talk about the ones that we have more experience than others with. Again, we're not aiming to be comprehensive here. We're not deciphering the wording of these prayers or looking at the origins of them. We're really aiming to keep opening up more opportunities to explore what's worked for us and what hasn't surrounding our prayer practices. We'll begin here with some prayers that might be more familiar to you, and then we'll wrap up with some that may be less common, including that prayer that Emily liked growing up, her angel prayer that we mentioned in our last show, and my old reliable prayer when dealing with obsession and obsessive thoughts. We have a whopping 7 prayers we're going to talk through, so let's get started first with number 1, the Serenity Prayer. So for all of these prayers that we're going to talk about, we're going to read kind of what is a common version of the prayer, just so we can all be on the same page in case you, our listener, aren't familiar with any of these particular prayers. So take it away.
The Serenity Prayer. And it goes like this. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.
I've probably said this prayer more times than any other prayer, I think, by now at this point. I guess that seems a little scary to think about it like that, but maybe many thousands of times over my decades of being in places where this prayer gets said, sometimes multiple times. Mm-hmm. And the elements of it, asking for something as broad as serenity, I really like that. I think we talked last time a little bit about not really in prayer asking for specific things. And of course, serenity, I mean, we're not asking for whatever God's will is for our state of mind. And so far in my spiritual practice, it has seemed totally okay and broad enough for me to ask for support moving towards serenity, which is part of what I hear here, and how I say it.
Mm.
And then the follow-up pieces, support accepting what can't be changed, and support changing what can be changed, and support knowing what the heck which stuff falls into which category.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I really love it when people, I actually feel like I don't really hear people discussing that categorization very often.
Mm-hmm.
I love it when somebody calls me up and says, hey, I'm dealing with this thing. Does that seem like a thing that there's something I can do action around? Or is that just a thing that I can accept? And for me, I mean, saying the prayer is great, but sometimes there may be footwork follow-up for me to do to actually untangle what we're talking about.
Oh, yeah. That's been my experience with this prayer. I think there was a time not too long ago that I realized a thing or two about things I had thought were in one category, but were really in the other category,
Yes.
like big things, and being like, oh.
So do you recall which way? I mean, you're welcome to share an example if you feel ready for one, and if not, that's fine too. But I was more wondering, so for myself, I used to feel like and think that everything was totally beyond my control. And as we've said in this Citizen 12 Steps, I see actually that I have quite a bit of power and capacity to take action and make choices. That doesn't mean I'm in control of something. I mean, let's say my physical health. I don't have a magic wand. I'm not in control. I can't, say words and have it be true. And that still leaves a ton of room for me to make all kinds of choices that shape my physical health.
I think I'm the opposite. I think that I was experiencing the belief that I can control and more than I can. And,
Yeah.
And so I was trying to change things about myself. In this particular instance, my big epiphany with this prayer was I was in a relationship and there were things about me that weren't accepted in the relationship. And it was a lot always on the table, God, these things about you, they really need to change, and so me being how am I going to change these things? I need to change these things. And then coming to the realization, this is who I am. These are things I don't have control over. And I mean, I can't even tell you, how many years of me trying to, maneuver this stuff and manipulate it and to know and
manage.
Manage
Yeah.
it. And I mean, I can see that in a lot. And I think it's very much in alignment with just my personality. I'm a little... I think this it might be a temperamental thing, being a little more high strung might be associated with that I
Doing more managing.
Doing more managing, yeah, thinking that there's more that I can manage. So the coming through in this prayer, realizing orienting myself to it talks about two different things. It talks about accepting things. Or having the courage to change things, but also accepting things that I cannot change. And I used to see it so much more as I can't change the things outside of myself, but all the stuff about me.
And actually, that talking about changing things outside of ourselves, but in preparing for this show, we've talked quite a bit about our role in our community for a couple of different reasons. We're having some environmental stuff happening in Seattle today while we're recording, both socially in our community and also environmentally with a lot of heavy smoke from wildfires. And we spent some time today talking about not ignoring broader calls to action for society, but also aiming to keep our attention today on what there is that we can do today in our right in front of me in my actual life. And, now that we're talking like this, I want to say this prayer is so short and it often gets kind of chanted or said so quickly that it takes some quiet meditative time to actually unpack what this prayer how full this prayer is, and to even like notice what it all means to me, which isn't a thing I knew to do, really. I don't recall anybody ever suggesting that I, take more time than just it takes to say the words to like reflect on a prayer. But that's definitely something I do.
Yeah, I reflect, but my experience has been more that, you start to wear these prayers when you're saying them on a daily basis at least once, and they just start to, their meanings, their
seeps in.
You start to, I don't know how else to prayer itself is a very powerful thing, obviously, and it's pretty ineffable to like this thing I'm trying to say. I think, it has a life of its own in a way, like in terms of the power that it holds, but also how transient the meaning can be.
That it grows and changes and comes and goes
with you as you grow.
Totally.
And as life grows around you.
I think that points to, my sense is that a lot of spiritual content is exactly that way. Mm-hmm. Spiritual texts, frequently we read them and we've read them before, but we see new meaning in them. It can be the same with prayers.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's exciting.
I want to emphasize what you said earlier. It got me feeling really enthusiastically when you were talking about, I think what you were saying is a lot to accept the things, or, to change the things we can. And how I think there is a common misconception that the external stuff is not on the table, but how sorely, like what a myth.
Well, it's just not at all how our lives have been unfolding. Mm-hmm. In fact, I know both of us well enough to know that as we have grown and healed, recovered, however you want to say that, we have continued to be sort of invited outward to be a part of contributing to our communities, whether that's our family, includes family and neighborhoods and social communities and organizations and institutions that we're a part of.
And in doing so, I think it really did take accepting
doing both
myself first. Yeah.
Interesting.
And more holy and not, I think so. Yeah. A very new understanding with this prayer. At first, I think it can be oppressive, especially if you are if you have internalized depression. You think, okay, I need to change everything about myself and accept everything that's coming my way.
Oh,
and
yeah, that's gonna be
I
rough.
think that people begin that prayer like that. I really do. I don't think I'm the only one.
I'm sure you're right that you're not the only one. I don't recall that it ever landed quite that way for me, but I know what it's like to get a first take on some spiritual content and have it be, well, what I heard and what you said was, I heard our enemy rigidity there, and also reading into something that isn't actually there, right? The prayer isn't about accepting outside circumstances and changing our inside selves. And that I have a lot of experience as a symptom of being clogged up is when I'm adding stuff that isn't there to something. Right. And I continue to be shocked and amazed at my ability to add meaning to stuff when it's not there. An example would be, I actually just went back and looked at an email that I received, almost 10 years ago, because in my mind, it had stuck in a particular way, and I watched a documentary and it reminded me, and I thought, I'll go look and see what he had actually said in this email. And I wasn't 100% wrong, but I can now see that I added meaning to what he had written, that there's no way of knowing if it was there or not. His words definitely didn't give me enough information to know if he meant what I had read into it. And having that flexibility, for me, this is mindfulness, having that agility to consider new information and let go of the assumptions I had previously made. This is life-changing stuff.
Absolutely.
Number 2, the Lord's Prayer.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. It just really made me feel like I was 10 years old again.
Saying the prayer?
Yeah.
Oh, that's adorable. Is this not a prayer you use these days?
Not so much anymore, no. It's a little bit too, riddled with church.
Riddled with church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think a great thing for us to talk about is how prayers can embody. Again, it's kind of this reading stuff into it that may not be there. Although I'll concede that even the language of this, it makes it ripe for being attached to other stuff like church. Even calling God Father can arouse complicated stuff that may not be there when saying God or whatever we say. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it before that I used this prayer every night. This was my childhood nightly prayer. I wanted to talk about it for a couple reasons. One is I actually still really like the points that are hit in this prayer, and I still include some of the aspects of this prayer in my now more conversational prayer life. Specifically, something about, for me, hallowed be thy name, the meaning there is about acknowledging the majesty or the it helps me get humble when I get related to how basically incomprehensible it is that the world is working the way that it's working, which, as I've said, is, maybe what I think of as God, is just whatever animates the universe. And that is basically incomprehensible. And so for me to take a moment to put words to how virtually incomprehensible that has seemed good and useful for me, and is not something I get in a lot of other prayers. I also do something with this prayer that can be done with any prayer that I think can be really helpful. I'll rephrase that. It has been very helpful to me to do this, which is to walk through the words of the prayer. And I actually do still do this with this prayer on occasion. So I'll say, Our Father who art in heaven, and then I'll kind of say what I actually mean by that. So I'll say, my God, that is everything, or you know what I mean? So I'll rephrase each line to better match what I actually mean while continuing with the sentiment of the prayer.
I mean, I'm guessing the person who wrote this, Jesus, right? I'm just joking. I'm guessing the person that wrote this put a lot of thought into it, and a lot of experience, life, pain, suffering, insight went into these words. They've been with us for a really long time. So I appreciate that you try to, that you keep it and that you take the time to, to pull freshen the meaning, and make it more relevant to you. I guess for me, it's I can see the value in that because, when you do look at it that way, that the meaning behind it is pretty good,
I think so.
Yeah.
I like the idea of keeping even the wording, give us this day our daily bread. For me, a big part of my current prayers is to be provided with what I need to keep my attention on today and what's right in front of me. And for me, that's what I'm saying there. And so again, it's like a matched sentiment of the prayer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see value in that.
thought we'd say a little something about using the word amen. I didn't put amen in the script when I wrote out the prayers today for any of these. And the Lord's Prayer is definitely a prayer that I think frequently people say amen at the end of, or something like amen. I don't think I ever use the word amen when I'm by myself or praying to myself, but I have noticed that it's actually, I do use it when I'm praying, especially aloud with other people, because it kind of like indicates that the praying is over. And that's probably not really what that's for. But maybe not. I guess I don't really know about the history. My sense is that it kind of means like I agree, I think is the technical meaning.
Yeah.
But
final emphasis.
Yeah, but really I use it functionally to say, okay, I'm done praying now. Mm-hmm. Which seems okay. Praying aloud with other people can be intermittently, well, I'll start with the good, lovely, connecting, intimate, nourishing. And then at other times for me it has seemed like rushed. I feel sometimes it can almost like erase almost. But I can find words more oppressive than I think some people find them. So yeah, sometimes I feel rushed and like ignored in group prayer, or when people pray aloud together sometimes. Like it's limiting, right. I think is what I'm trying to say. Another thing that I thought we could use the Serenity Prayer as an occasion to talk about is something that I think I first heard about through Byron Katie's work, which we've talked about in the show a little bit before, and we can link in the show notes again. And maybe it's even in her book, Loving What Is, that she talked about how it can be useful to assess stuff and categorize it in 3 different categories. We've talked about this before, right, Emily? Mm-hmm. The categories being that there's stuff that's my business, me, Paige, my personal business, and then there's stuff that's other people's business, so like your Emily business, and then there's stuff that's God's business. And that sometimes spending some effort to observe if I'm trying to engage in controlling, managing some stuff that's not my business can be a big relief. And I really hear that that's sort of also the framework with the Serenity Prayer. Is this, again, this sort of assessment, well, is this my business or is this God's business? That's what I heard when you were talking about the relationship. Mm-hmm. You were thinking you could change stuff that's actually, as I don't think of this like literally like these like concrete reality that some stuff is your business and some stuff's God's business. I think it's a useful tool, a way of looking at this. And so what you were saying is some of the stuff you were trying to change wasn't your business to change. It was God's business.
Yes. I've used this little exercise and it's really cool how much can get taken off your shoulder when you're like, okay, God's business, never mind.
Yeah, like a common example I think would be like the weather. Like if it's rainy and we're getting worked up or spending a lot of focus and attention about being disappointed or irritated or annoyed or who knows about it being rainy. Really, that's just not in my sphere of business or yours, Emily. Like, that's going to be something we would categorize as God's business. And it can be just noticing that I'm exerting effort around something that is not my business can bring real relief.
Right.
Number 3, the St. Francis prayer.
Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred I may bring love, that where there is wrong I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord I may bring harmony, that where there is error I may bring truth, that where there is doubt I may bring faith, that where there is despair I may bring hope, that where there are shadows I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. Lord, grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, to understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. I can kind of see now why you think this is dismissive.
So when we prepared for the show, I told Emily, we were talking about which prayers we would address, and Emily was like, "Oh, is it okay for me to say? Oh, I like that prayer." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "Oh, look, I even put it in the script. I don't like this."
Yeah, I totally see what you're talking about now. How it's kind of like it's not giving any space or honoring any of these more quote unquote negative aspects of life, which is like it's what I have found just doesn't work.
Is to ignore doubt or
despair,
error or
sadness,
shadows, right?
The need for self-love, need for yeah,
and I think this is back to our point about adding meaning that isn't there. Clearly, this prayer isn't saying ignore the existence or reality of despair and cover it up and pretend it away and just make there be hope. But that was what I got from it, was that, and this, I take responsibility for that. I have done this with a lot of things in terms of spiritual work, where rather than actually growing into change, I have tried to just paste on top with the new thing that I think is better. And really that has resulted in a lot of pretending. So I think I had more practice at like pretending to bring hope on top of despair than I actually had at like doing what it would take to cause being hopeful or offering hope while still making space to acknowledge any despair that might be there. So I don't think that the prayer inherently demands dismissal or cutting off of acknowledgement. It just was ripe for me to do that with. And so I have never really used it very much. I think you, our listener, may be getting to know me well enough to trust that it's not that I'm not interested in faith, let's say, or bringing faith to people or encouraging faith, but I'm not interested in faith at the cost of acknowledging where there's doubt. That to me, it looks like there's space for all of that stuff, and that acknowledging it actually is what keeps making the space for faith.
It's interesting because the last time I used this prayer, I think I did use it, now that I look back, as a way to move forward in like a pretending way.
Try to make something go away.
Yeah, absolutely. Should I say it?
If you're up for it. Or do you want to take a moment to think about it? I can share that when this has come up for me, as I can even think that it's been recommended to me, it is when I'm feeling unloved or something. Well, where I am now, if I'm feeling unloved, there's stuff for me to reflect on, consider, and acknowledge, and using a prayer, back to the God as vending machine, to like try to manage feeling unloved. That's not what my prayer life is for at all anymore. But it's very easy and common that it collapses into that.
That's exactly what it was. Yeah. I was dating somebody and
You're so cute.
Well, I was dating somebody and I was like on the way to go see them, and I think I was feeling very like unappreciated and unloved, and then so my insight was like, maybe you shouldn't go see this person, and I used this prayer, I think, and it was interesting when I said it, I had all of this like, this newfound like ability to like go to see them in like a new mood and like a new outlook, because if because I'm not like, I'm not going for me to be loved. Like, it's, I totally see now that I used it more as like a way to, not acknowledge myself and the things that were like coming up for me and my needs.
I'm so sorry.
I
I
mean,
hate that happens to any of us.
Right. It sucks, but
I mean, I really related. That's why
Yeah.
we're talking about this, is that I see that this prayer can be ripe for that. Now, on the flip side, developing an orientation toward generosity and consideration of others and what can I contribute, excellent, beautiful, does not at all require me negating or killing myself off or the validity of my experience and feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that this prayer, I mean, yeah, the idea that we should consider what we can bring and like the love that we can give and the forgiving and all of these things are very positive, but
But the risk.
right, I mean, yeah, I guess knowing this I think moving forward, it would be important to evaluate if there's anything like on the left-hand side of the column that's being dismissed or not acknowledged.
Yeah, and for myself, it wasn't always accessible to me to feel secure enough, to be secure enough to make space to acknowledge the reality or validity of my feelings. And I think that that's probably part of why a lot of the communities that we've been in are really quick to shut that part down and just get people directed toward, well, what can you contribute? Is like, to some extent how warped we have been in the past with the amount of attention and focus we've placed on ourselves and our feelings. But to be moving toward like wholeness and what I think of as like a sustainable, durable way to actually live a whole, full, good life, it includes appreciation and validation of all of it, the whole picture. And I now I feel like I'm being repetitive, but it doesn't appear to require that I negate myself or my feelings or my thoughts. So if I notice that I'm feeling unloved, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Maybe there's something to examine. It of course is a possibility that I'm engaging in a relationship where I'm not being loved. It's not that that's impossible. So why wouldn't I make space to observe if I'm being loved? It's not that that doesn't matter. And really, in a way, it doesn't have anything to do with if I'm being loving. In fact, I have definitely been in relationships with people where I have loved and been loving and not had that returned. I don't think that's a flaw of mine. I think that's just a thing that happens, and having the wherewithal and access to being able to see that clearly has really supported me. So I'm very skeptical of anything that kind of diminishes that access to clear eyes.
Yeah, I'm glad we broke that up a little bit. It's helpful.
Before we come back to talk about some maybe less familiar prayers, we pause here to thank and acknowledge our listener supporters. Thank you to our Patreon patrons who have early access to each show. So for our non-patron listeners, you all get access every Friday. And for our Patreon supporters at any contribution level, receive access on Monday morning. Find out more at patreon.com/C12Pod, C12Pod. Number 4, the set-aside prayer.
God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, these steps, and especially you, for an open mind and a new experience with myself, my disease, these steps, and especially you.
The way that you just said the prayer is a way that this is commonly said, but Well, I guess there are a bunch of different versions of all of the prayers we have used. In my experience, the set-aside prayer of the prayers we've talked about so far, there's quite a lot of variation in how people say and use this prayer. And I think there was a time when I said it quite a lot like how you read it. And these days, I do still use the set-aside prayer, and I never say it like you just said it. Do you use this prayer these days?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. So maybe even in the past when you did use it similarly to me, I always ask God to help me set aside the specific thing that I want help setting aside. So that may be worrying. So I might say, God, help me set aside worrying for a new experience with what I'm doing, or like that. So I make it really, or a specific person. I guess I shouldn't use anybody's name, but on occasion I might need assistance in setting aside what I'm thinking about any particular person or circumstance so that I can have a new experience. And it's interesting because as we're talking about it now, I can hear the opportunity to, similarly to the St. Francis prayer, somehow like negate. Like when I ask for assistance in setting aside what I am thinking or knowing or feeling, for me, that doesn't mean I'm pretending it away or setting it aside forever. Like, let's say someone has legitimately harmed me. So whatever that might mean to you, but someone has definitively, legitimately, with certainty harmed me. I still may find that it would serve me at times to set aside what I've got going on about that harm so that I can be operating newly and differently with my day. Mm-hmm. That's not for me, it's not as tempting with this prayer to like negate the stuff I'm setting aside. I think maybe I just prefer this terminology. Like setting aside is so gentle.
Right. It's not discard.
It's not discard.
It's asking for more openness, more perspective, like a broader perspective, perhaps some new insight. I like that idea a lot.
It's really important to me that I don't pray things that I don't actually mean. And I think the set-aside prayer is a good example. So, like, let's just pretend I say this prayer, but I actually am not interested in setting aside what I think about myself for a new experience with myself. I don't want to make that prayer. I actually think that there's some cost, that the cost of saying prayers that I don't mean is great enough that it's worth avoiding me doing it. So I also work really hard not to make prayers like saying shit I don't mean. The thing that keeps coming to mind is not exactly this, but feels related. So there have been a number of times in my life where I have, prayed, yes, I'm going to use the word beseech or beg. I have begged God to help me, like save me from myself, save me from this behavior, for example. And really for a long time, it seemed like that's what people did. Like I thought that was what I was supposed to be doing, that was prayer. Ask God to save me from my behavior. At some point, it like clicked for me that I could say the prayer and then I actually had to not do the behavior. That this is kind of back to this my business, God's business thing. I have as of yet had lightning bolts strike things out of my hands, or do you know what I mean? Like whatever cinematic version of divine intervention would be. Dealing with myself about that so that I'm not making prayers that I don't mean has really added power to my prayers.
Yeah, I think that I think like if you're to come to a prayer with some empowerment is important, like I'm not going to say I'm ready for something that I'm not ready for. I'm not going to say I'm willing to do something I'm not willing to do. And that's respectful to myself and whatever it is I'm trying to relate to in that moment.
Yeah, and that doesn't mean I can't ask for willingness.
Right.
But to be I'm really down, not down with, that means for. I'm really, how do you say that? I'm really not into pretending. I think that pretending is not, I just, for me, it has just brought so many problems. And it's hard for me to see if it's ever brought something better than problems.
I agree. And I think I understand why people do it. I understand why I do it. I think it does come from like some oppression and, like self-hating. Like
when we're trying to talk ourselves into something. So we, like if we say, I'm willing that you now have all of me, God, maybe we're like hoping to be like creative when we say it, hoping that if we say it, that'll then be true.
Right.
And I guess that sounds fine, but for me, it would still probably work better, I think, to say, God, this is me demonstrating how deeply I want to surrender myself to you. Please help me with the rest of the way. Right. Please help me identify and let go of the spots where I'm still holding on. Like for me, that's just a way more honest thing to say. And yeah, I'm striving to practice being honest even in my prayers.
Right. Absolutely. And I find that to be such an empowering practice too. Like this is where I truly am at.
Yeah.
Can you work with me like this? And to get to a place where you start to really feel like, oh, like God is working with me as I am.
Where I am. Yeah. Where I actually am.
That is where I think you can experience the love from God.
I'm going to add too that when I've tried to pretend something in prayer or ask for something I'm not ready for, let's even injurious behaviors, asking, sort of seventh step stuff, whatever people, commonly called character defects. For me, the juice is in doing the work to let go of the behavior or defect, not in saying the words, God, please remove it from me. It's still going to be that I have to live in alignment with it having been removed. That's the power. That's what is going to make the difference. So I have to deal with myself to even determine, am I actually interested and ready to let go of being dishonest or whatever it is? A snag there is that when I've said, take away my pettiness, or I don't know, that'd be one example. And then, shockingly, I still have access to being petty. For me, that has started to foster weird ideas about God. It's very easy then to think, well, God doesn't work or God's not real or whatever. And I think, fortunately, I don't seem to really bump into having those problems. That God isn't real, quote unquote. Yes, I know as an atheist that sounds really weird, or that God doesn't work, but I just don't bump into those as concerns. But I see how very common they are. In fact, we could probably do a whole show about barriers with conception, a conception of God that are common, including it's not working, or what kind of God would let this happen, or for me, they're all related, and I think they're related to doing a funky thing in how we relate to this thing.
Right.
Rather than that God doesn't work.
Right. Absolutely.
Number 5, Emily's childhood prayer. Oh, did you want to say something more about the set-aside prayer? Okay.
We're here.
We're here. Number 5, Emily's childhood prayer.
Okay. Angel of God, my guardian dear, to whom his love commits me here, ever this night be at my side, to light and guard, to rule and guide. So, my grandma gave me a prayer card with a picture of an angel on it when I was young. And I kept it, and I used it, and I memorized it, and I liked this prayer because, well, I really think I liked the idea of angels. And like looking back, I think that, because I have the same experience now, like angels are a softer presence. The feminine presence is softer than a patriarchal presence. Of course, I can see in this prayer that he has employed the angel to come to me, but still, I like everything I was asking in this prayer. I think like protection, but also the guidance. I think, and I think I still say this prayer sometimes today, because I think guidance is what I want the most. I really would like to be guided in the right direction. I like this prayer. I think it's really cute. I don't really know what else to say about it.
Well, I'll confess that even though I had read this a couple of times, and now hearing you read it, it's still I mean, my reading comprehension's okay, but sometimes with some of this stuff, it's like hard for me to kind of draw out what the kernels are.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just still kind of getting my mind around, like an acknowledgement that God cares about us, and God's with us, and showing us how to proceed, and guiding and protecting. Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, those seem like pretty good, lovely, fine things to be reminding ourselves and to asking for support in remembering. And I guess now that we've done this much of the show, I guess I can hear that one of the things I really see that prayer is for is just reminding ourselves stuff.
Right.
Which that seems fine. That seems like a fine thing to have a practice of doing.
I think it's so important with how our brains work. Our brains are, I mean, in a lot of ways they work for us, but in a lot of ways they don't. And so I think because so much happens in a day, and we're just constantly trying to process things in order to like survive and get through the day, that prayers, for me at least, like this prayer it was like a reminder of like why I want to be here, like why I want to be alive, like a reminder of what was important. And I needed that, and I still definitely need that.
Yeah. Number 6. Well, the name of the prayer is the whole prayer. It's a really short prayer. So I'm just going to say, number 6, I trust you. I love you. I smile. So I, in a quick search, didn't actually find that this prayer is a real set prayer, but I had a friend many, many, many years ago who had shared with me how much they loved using this prayer, that they found it to be short enough that it could be used almost more like a mantra, that it could be repeated. And actually, on that note, I know people who use the set-aside prayer that way too, say it in repetition as a self-reassurance and a way to meditate. For my friend who taught me this prayer, I feel like he was selling it to me like a car. He was like, it's got all the pieces you need, man, It says, it's what else do we need to say? We trust God. We love God. We're happy, And he really would like generate smiling and trusting and loving through making this prayer. And that's sweet stuff. And sometimes it is nice to have something really short, simple, and sweet. And this goes back to, maybe a thing to say is that, of course, language probably most commonly is used to describe ourselves, to describe events. Language can also be creative, declarative, where we speak something into existence, where we create being married to each other by saying, I'm married to you. And then, yes, of course, the words have to be followed up with action to support the words. But I don't want to make it sound like I am discounting creative speaking. I think maybe for me it's a reminder that being clear about what I'm doing, or like saying something and pretending I'm describing something when that's not the case, that's the thing that's important.
I hear you. Yeah. So you're saying there's pretending and then there's generativity in prayer. And I mean, it's up, I think we can trust that everyone hopefully can understand what they're doing.
Well,
doing it.
I guess I don't think I did. I don't think even when I have used this prayer that I maybe was checking, well, where am I not trusting God? Which might be a really fruitful thing to reflect on before making a prayer like this.
Right.
So I think, as we're talking about this, I feel like I'm being nourished in my understanding of how I view prayer. I hope you, our listener, also feel a part of this conversation about continuing to get value out of this work as we talk about it.
Right, because I can see the value in saying, I trust you, I love you, I smile, and I can see that it's acknowledging I think a lot of us can just fall into negativity more and like pick apart the negatives and where we're not trusting and when we're not loving and where we're not smiling. But
interesting.
For me, I think this sort of highlights the parts of me that are smiling,
having a beautiful
and
practice.
Trusting and loving. Yeah,
that's great. It's so funny. I definitely I seem to have an easier access to seeing where I'm trusting and smiling and loving, and my ego. Have I said this in the show before that I'm not sure I have. I say this in my life so much that I wake up in the morning and my ego says I'm a nice, normal lady. And that's like almost all I can see about myself. And of course, yeah, sure, I am a nice, I don't know about normal. I'm a nice lady. But stopping at that has not provided much of an access to learning anything about me or life or relationships. And doing something to cut through that is what has been helpful. But obviously, some of us are kind of bent in different directions with our propensity to be self-praising or self-critical.
I can wake up and see things only like I would never use those words, but yeah, I'm a nice lady, But there's like what you said, like a grounding that has to happen. It's not like, no, I'm not a nice lady. There's all these things about me that I need to like
pick apart or
it's like, no, there's just like a grounding, and yes, I am wonderful, but also
let's see what else is here.
Let's see what else is
well,
going
actually,
on.
Here's another thing I talk about a lot, and I just talked about it with someone the other day, and I don't recall if we've put it in the show before. So I heard that, okay, bear with me for a moment. We're going to talk about open-mindedness, and sometimes that can be hairy for people. So I learned that if I say to myself, I am open-minded and I view myself as open-minded and I identify with being a person who's open-minded, that in and of itself actually closes off my access to seeing where I'm not open-minded. Whoa. That like pretty much blew my mind. That was something I was taught. I did not come to that on my own. I don't know if I would have on my own. It's not a thing I hear people talk about very often. I was very grateful for that tidbit of information, that certainty and even some rigidity precludes being able to see a fuller picture. And I obviously here you and I are interested in seeing a fuller picture. Mm-hmm. So I think it can be the same with being trusting or being nice. If I'm only, I think we like to think of ourselves as considerate and respectful and kind and all kinds of things. Well, someone in the world isn't being all those ways. And who is it? And some of us better get access to seeing where we're not being kind and considerate and honoring and respectful. And for me, it starts with me getting better access at seeing where I'm not the way that my ego is telling me I am.
What's helped me to frame that phenomenon so well is like Jungian stuff, like the ideas of, well, how Jungians use fairy tales and how like all the people in the fairy tales are like the villain, the hero, the whore, the witch, all of them. They're all aspects of ourselves. And Jungians like really normalize that we all embody all the pieces, the good and the bad. And that's actually helped me more than anything to swallow and be able to sort of like face, quote unquote, like the shadow aspects. So I thought I'd share that just because
Thank you.
It's
yeah.
been really helpful.
Really, my experience is that anything that can cut into the ego, and the thing is ego isn't bad either. I don't know what would become of us if we didn't have this component of self-protection. And it's just not the whole story. I don't want any one part of me running the whole show. That my ego is durable enough that I actually have to do like a bunch of stuff to kind of get around it to get the other stuff I need. I really appreciate you adding that. Mm-hmm. Number 7, yet again, this prayer is so short that the name of the prayer is the whole prayer. So I'm just going to say it. And I teased this in the introduction that I would share my reliable prayer for dealing with obsession and obsessive thinking. And this is it. So the prayer goes like this: please, God, or however you want to say it, God, please direct my attention to something useful. That's the whole prayer. But whenever I ever talk to anybody about the prayer, I say, okay, but then you have to listen for where you might have now direct your attention. And then you have to direct your attention to the new thing. So it's like a 3-parter. It's the words of the prayer. And really, I guess I'm now seeing we could say this for all the prayers. There are the words of the prayer, and then there's like doing the thing. And this one, because it's asking for guidance, we say the word. I mean, it might still be useful to just keep saying the words over and over and again. And honestly, there have been times where I can actually, it was a romance episode for me. I was dating someone and I kept noticing that my attention just, no matter what I was doing all day, they were all I could think about. And I did actually have like other life, like it wasn't needed for me to keep only having my attention on this affair. And that was a long time ago, but that is actually the last time I remember very much depending on this prayer for assistance. I found that returning to thinking about the fling very disorienting. And so I was interested in maintaining my orientation in my life. And so I was saying, God, please direct my attention to something useful. And my recollection was that there was quite a bit of like housework to do at the time. And, it's not, I mean, God, I don't talk like God has said all that many things to me, but God has sure talked to me a lot about like doing dishes and brushing my teeth and, well, yeah, doing dishes and brushing my teeth. Those are 2 things that God has said a lot of times to me. And really my experience is that doing the dishes has been fruitful, useful for me, and like spending more attention, more mental effort, thinking about something, fretting about it, or even just giving attention to something. I don't know how useful that's been. I know it's been disorienting.
Yeah, I like that there's a responsibility in this prayer actually really to move our attention to something else. And it has been very helpful for me as well in obsessive thinking. Really helpful. I think whenever we're in like a pit of obsession, we want to leave it, but this prayer makes it very simple. It's like, what is the next sort of, what is the what is something I can do now that's useful now? And when you're an adult, I don't think it's very difficult to find something to be responsible for.
Well, and sometimes there might be something really pressing, like, you know, I'm imagining when I have the care of a child, you know, like to have obsessive thoughts happening when I definitely am needed elsewhere.
Right.
My focus and attention is needed elsewhere. So I use it a lot. Well, I give it away a lot. I'm very grateful to say, and I've shared this before, I have grown into far more emotional and mental discipline than I ever thought was possible. And part of the fruit of that is that I don't find myself suffering with obsessive thinking very frequently. And I don't want to make it sound like, and so just do what I do and you won't have any obsessive thinking. Of course, it's more complicated than that. And it took many, many years of practice. And this has been a tool that has been able to cut into that some for me.
Yeah, I agree. I'm definitely someone who suffers from obsessive thinking and have definitely less so since I've used
all these practices, really, right?
But this sort of idea of
being responsible for attention.
Being responsible for attention and where I'm putting my attention and action.
Yeah.
It's like the driest, you know, I mean, it's just like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to like come into my fantasy world and fix this for me.
Oh.
Right? Like that's never been.
Has that not worked?
I mean, not up to now.
Well, I mean, that's what I was saying about the behavior. God has never come and knocked items out of my hand or made it so I couldn't open my front door. Or, I mean, I don't even know what it would take to.
And I think that, you know, that has a lot to do with the conception, too, of God. I mean, here there's a lot of responsibility. Like, all of the responsibility seems to be ours here.
That's interesting you said it that way. That made me think, the way we've been talking about this, it makes it sound like we've had kind of, childish ideas about God and sort of like like a fairy tale, like that God is going to make it so I can't open my front door and then I won't be able to, I don't know, do something that I don't think I'm supposed to do. Yeah, that's not real life.
Or do the part that requires the effort.
Like
redirecting attention is... But I also want to say, like, it's very difficult, but it gets easier. It's like any sort of exercise. You have to just use that muscle, right? More and more.
And it just starts with one time. It just starts with this time. Using the crowbar just the first time to pry that in and make the prayer and listen and maybe have it not work and have to say the prayer again and listen again and call somebody and say, okay, I guess I could just get my attention on doing the laundry right now, but I don't want to. I want to talk to myself more about this thing or talk to you about it and to have a community of support where we say, well, how about we just do the laundry first and see then what comes next? Practice.
I like that you brought that up because I think a lot of prayer can and really usefully can be used to be like something that you share with someone. Like I'm using this prayer and I want you to know about it because this is like an area of my life where I need, you know, some redirection. And so it can kind of become like,
shared.
Yeah, shared. And I think that gives it, you know, it helps, at least for me, it's helped me sort of orient myself to what I need to do and where my responsibility is. Otherwise I just don't think it's as impactful.
Well, I see we have very little chance of making all this stuff happen like all on our own by ourselves. Right. I never would have learned how to do any of this or make prayers or have any chance of any of this without. We said it in the intro to the show in the pre-episode that this is probably like tens of thousands of years of people's experience living, trying to figure out how to live well, not just automatic.
Yeah. And I think it's important. That's why I'm glad we're not just like, oh, these are old Christian prayers. I think
it's alive.
Yeah.
And the sentiment in these things is very old. Maybe as old as people and language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we will undoubtedly come back to these topics again, but that is all for now. Thank you, listener, for joining us. This show isn't a thing without you. And I'm going to confess, I really am hungry to have more interaction from our listeners. We really do want to hear from you. Please find us online. Chime in, write to us. We're listening for how best to serve. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, all at C12Pod. Again, that's C12Pod. Also, I nabbed C12Pod.com for us. So if you go to C12Pod.com, you'll be redirected to another page and you can learn about the show there and listen to episodes straight from the website. We haven't been mentioning particularly, but we are also on YouTube, where you can find us by searching C12Pod. For now, we have pulled back from posting to SoundCloud and Vimeo, but again, if I hear any different, we will start posting there again, if it makes sense. It looks to us as though our community could really use this content, and we're excited to create and share it. This is a 100% listener-supported show. So if you already like what you're hearing, or even if you don't, but you think what we're up to is good, please support us by subscribing, rating the show, writing us a review, wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you to each of you who contribute to this work.
Thank you.